That I had with the young lady that was just it was just bad all the way around. Those relationships was like really really bad, but you don't really want to like admit it's really really bad. It was that bad. And I'll never forget. We were coming from a restaurant. We went out to eat. I think it was like a Sunday afternoon, and she looked over at me and she said, I feel like your relationship with God, that you prefer God over me, that I'm not first, and she wanted to be first in my life. And I looked over at her, and I was driving, and I said to her, I'm sorry, but it'll never be that way. I can't. You can never come before God. And not only that, but I guarantee you that you shouldn't want to. You should want me to have that relationship with God first as the foundation, so that you can make sure that I can always treat you with the type of respect and honor that you deserve. Needless to say, she didn't like that. She was like, take me to my friend's house. We ain't gonna talk no more. Blah blah blah. So I take her to her friend's house, and as I pull up to the apartment complex, I told her, I said, look, if you get out of the car, I'm not gonna do this again. I'm not coming back. I'm not gonna say, hey, we should try to do this over again, and hey, let's try to get back together. It's over. It's done. She got out of the car. She didn't say a word. She got out of the car. She slammed the door, and I was like, oh, okay, so that's how we're gonna do this. But it was cool. But even from that point, leaving from that relationship, which was years of just chaos, leaving from that relationship, I found myself just you know I almost just trying to like flirting with the waters, just kind of seeing, how far I can get with certain people, and found myself, doing things that, nowadays I greatly regret. I would have, women who would come over to my house and, who would do stuff for me, and who would, it was just a really, really bad place that I was in. And at that time, I'm still calling myself a professing Christian. I actually work for a church, which is really, really bad too. But I found myself finally coming and saying, all right, God, no more of this. If I'm going to truly, say that I'm honoring you, I want to honor you with this, and I'm just going to trust. And I got to a point where I was like, I'm not going to even really be married, and I'm kind of cool with that. I'm straight with that. I'm fine with the idea of not being in a relationship, and that's cool. And right when I pushed that away, it's like, I finally got into this groove of just being happy, just kind of being me, and happy just having this relationship with God, and not having to worry about contacting this person, and I got to talk to you today, and we got to work on our communication skills, and you need to do this, and you need to be better at doing this. I didn't have to do all of that. It was just me. And it's like months later, my wife Heather, she comes into the picture, and in 15 minutes of the conversation, I knew that she was going to be my wife. And she says to me afterwards that she also knew that I was going to be her husband. And we courted for a year and 8 months. It wasn't the most perfect picture. It was, we broke up a month into our courtship because I was being stubborn. She lived in New York, I lived in Atlanta, and I just didn't want to talk on the phone all the time. That's one thing that, you have those things you just loathe. I just loathe talking on the phone. It's like, don't call me, text me. And when she would get upset and she's like, you don't call me. Like, that's all we have is just communication and you're not talking to me. And I was like, maybe I need some time to think about this. And she was like, oh, you need time to think about this? You need time to think about this? Well, let me make up your mind for you, brother. You can go ahead, you can have this. And I was like, okay, well, cool. So we went our separate ways. And then, I knew I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I knew I was. And I hit her back. I text her. I sent her like a BBM. I think it's called BBM. I haven't used it in a while. But I used a BlackBerry Messenger. And I was like, hey, I miss you. And she's like, well, what do you miss? And I'm like, oh, we're going to go through this now. We can play this little high school game. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I missed, this and this. And so we got back together, and at that point we made up our minds that we're going to work this thing out. So a year and 8 months goes by, and on August 14th, 2010, I had an opportunity to kiss my wife for the first time. We kissed each other for the first time on our wedding day. And I didn't kiss her on the hand, I didn't kiss her on the forehead, didn't kiss her on the cheek. I kissed her the first time that my mouth ever touched her in any type of way, or my lips per se, touched her in any type of way was on our wedding day. And it was my way of honoring God. And I actually write about that. I write about, why I did that and what that looked like. I have a chapter in this book entitled Virgin Lips, where I actually talk about, the conversation that I believe that I had with God about, why I did this. At that time, I'd never heard of it being done. I knew how I was in my past relationships. I always knew that, if I got the best way to kind of settle a confrontation in my past relationships was to be physical. And I found myself becoming physical and becoming more affectionate because I found that was the best way to deal with the issue without really dealing with the issue. The first thing that I went for was the physical affection instead of saying, okay, let's actually deal with the emotional part of this. Why is it that I don't like to talk? Why is it that I can't communicate? And I never really got to that point of maturing emotionally or maturing in these relationships because I always reverted back to, well, we could just make this physical. But abstaining from even something this as simple and could be as harmless as kissing, for me, it allowed for me to develop emotionally, which is what I greatly needed before I got married. It required me as a man to also lead. It required me to set up different boundaries, and I write about some of the boundaries that my wife and I that we put up in our courtship. I talk about we would go out in groups. When we were courting, my wife would tell me, she'd get upset. She's like, why can't we just go out by ourselves? I don't get it. And I'm telling her, I'm like, I know that my equipment works. I know how it works. I know how it was in the past. And for me, I know the boundaries that I needed in order to make sure that this remains pure. And I felt like, as the man, I felt like that was more of my responsibility to take care of and less of hers. I wanted to treasure her as God's daughter, and I wanted to treasure her as also as his vessel. And in this assembly that we're creating, I want to make sure that I'm treasuring her, and in doing that, I need to make sure that I'm protecting her. And I wanted to protect her with boundaries, and boundaries do protect. I also know one key thing. One wisdom point is, it only takes a very small flame to start a raging fire. If you have, let's just say you have a dry desert, a dry, not desert, a desert, but forest. And you have trees and you have the shrubbery, you have all these things out, but it's very dry. Nothing has rained on it in a long time. Then if you take a very small match, and you throw it out there in the forest, you may think, oh, this is harmless. It's just a little bit small flame. The only problem is that when you put it out amongst that dry forest, it's going to catch on fire. And when the fire comes, the fire is going to be huge. And, when we don't necessarily look at what these boundaries could really do. And for me, they protect. For me, the boundaries made sure that we can keep the honor that we have with one another. So I talk about that in this chapter called Virgin Lips. I write about, till death do us part. What that really looks like. I have a chapter in here about the vows, about the engagement and the ceremony. Because when you're single, you're kind of, or when you're in this courtship, or you're getting ready to court, or you're in this thing, what you're always thinking, what is the next step of this? And even in one of the chapters I write, I have in here. It's entitled Purpose Driven Relationship. Really asking yourself and allowing for you to look at yourself and say, okay, what is the purpose of this relationship? Is this relationship only the purpose of sex? Is the relationship, is our relationship just, only surface level? Have we really, dove deep into some really, intricate and important things? Have we talked about some really important things like, how many kids do you want to have? And what was your mom like? Have I met the parents yet? Have I met your family? These are important things that you may not think about, but once you get married, they're going to be very important because you're going to need to know if mother-in-law is very overprotective of her son, or if father-in-law keeps if he keeps the shelves of guns trying to keep men away from his daughter. These things are important. So really, looking at what is the importance of that. The first chapter of this book, though, is called the Beauty of Being Single, and I write about what being single looks like. It's not a prison sentence, and I write about what that looks like, and I write about how the single man and the single woman, as the Bible says, they have an opportunity to just really be free and do what God tells them to do without having to worry about the cares of the world. And at the end of the chapter, I tell them, if marriage is not something that you're seeking right now, then you really need to just rest, and you really just need to spend more time with God and really just get in the habit of what it is that He wants you to do. One of the things that I'm very glad, and one of the things that I really prayed for in my wife, was that I would marry a woman who I would be in a relationship with a woman who was really sold out to God, that she knew who she was in Christ, and that ultimately when we got together, we came together with purpose. We weren't just kind of two people just kind of, we're just going to just kind of see how it goes. But it was like we came together, and that's where the purpose just merged together. So in this book, So You Want to Be Married, my whole goal was to show people that, number one, godly living is possible. Having honor in your relationships is possible. And that there are people who do it. And even though you may not see the examples around you, it's out there. And I wrote this book also because I had so many people who would ask me, hey, tell me about your story. Tell me about your story. And I thought, well, what's the best way I can do it? Just put it in a book. And at the end of this book, I have questions. So these are some of the same questions that, my wife and I, that we asked each other after we got engaged. It was, what am I disgusted by? What are my hobbies? What hurts me the most? Just having good conversation, asking really, thoughtful questions like what my reasons for wanting to get married are. Or we have some questions in here about finances. What do you think money is? Spending money is hard or easy for me because my biggest waste of money is this. And with these questions, it took us, one time we went through some of the questions, and I think we talked for like 17 or 18 hours because the questions required conversation. And it also required me to learn some things about myself and also about the woman to whom ultimately is going to be my wife. So ultimately, when we got married, it was like, okay, we've talked about this. So this is not a surprise to me. I understand this because we've already gone through this. So if you are single, or you say, hey, I want to get into a courtship, or I just want to kind of know what this thing is like. I want to kind of know if I'm on the right track or what this track kind of looks like. I hear so many things about it, but I'm not really sure what it's supposed to look like. I encourage you. You can get the book, So You Want to Be Married. It's available. You can go to CorneliusLindsey.com. You can order it off of my website, CorneliusLindsey.com, or you can order it from Amazon. I think it's even downloadable on Kindle, so you can put it on your Kindle or on your iPad or whatever. I don't know. But hey, grab the book. So You Want to Be Married. But ultimately, thank you so much for tuning into my channel. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and also share the videos. You never know who it could help and who it could support. God bless you so much. Bye.